Over 1 million Chinese citizens will be able to vote in U.S. elections in the coming years because of an anchor baby scheme or birthright citizenship. Watch this report from excellent journalist Peter Schweizer, and then we'll discuss.
China has an industrial scale model that they have been doing this for more than 10 years. They advertise and they run articles in the People's Daily, the CCP main publication, telling members of the Chinese Communist Party elite, go to the United States, your child can get U.S. citizenship. They're encouraging them to do it. And we in the United States have no idea how many Chinese officials have done this because we don't track it. It's not on birth certificates. The Chinese government believes that over the last 13 years, every year, roughly 100,000 Chinese babies have been born in the United States who are then brought back to China where they are being raised. So do the math. That's more than 1 million, quote unquote, U.S. citizens who are being raised in China. And guess what? When they turn 18, Steve, they're going to be able to vote. They're going to be able to donate to political campaigns. They're going to be able to apply to government jobs. It's a massive organized security breach. That's what's going on here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you'll recall that President Trump tried to end birthright citizenship on day one of his current term with this executive order. Lawsuits were filed almost immediately. The case is currently being heard in the Supreme Court. We have not heard oral arguments, but we do know what the government's case is. This is a biggie, but we won't get a ruling until June. So in the meantime, Representatives Thomas Massie and Brian Babbitt have introduced the Birthright Citizenship Act. It closes a loophole that laws. Under its provisions, children of illegal aliens would not qualify for 14th Amendment birthright citizenship. Now, this is kind of interesting, and I want to make the point that it may be the government's way of sort of moving against its own interests. And here's why. I'm against birthright citizenship, not just because of anchor babies, but because it doesn't just confer rights. It imposes permanent and inescapable taxation for a human being. So starting at birth, almost like the Matrix, these little taxpayers are stamped out, and then wherever they live in the world, they have to pay taxpayers. Like you're born a slave. You cannot refuse it. You have to file your taxes even if you don't live here. You have to report worldwide income because of Obama, and the banks that work with you also have to report all of your assets. So birthright citizenship, to my mind, is jurisdictional capture, which raises the question, why would the Chinese do this, create these little Chinese dual citizens that now puts Chinese money into U.S. taxpayer coffers? So it's interesting. Now, you may remember a couple years ago, we did this segment about Meghan and Harry's baby. If they were to inherit from the British crown, the U.S. would get their hands on royal money because they're U.S. citizens. Maybe that's why the king took away their titles, that and the fact that they're brats. So what is this scheme for China? Why would China risk exposing Chinese money to the U.S. government? What's in it for them? Former U.S. Attorney Michael Wynn has spoken about these issues. Thank you so much for joining us. How do we know this is happening, and what do you think is the end game?
All right. Well, it's happening, and I'm not so concerned about the tax consequences. The likelihood of most of these anchor babies, if you will, ever paying taxes, I think, or being pursued for a failure to pay taxes, I think is de minimis, really. The larger concern is the long-term impact. And the Chinese do, as a culture, we all hear this, they look at the longer run. Our view is maybe in the next quarter, the next, generation. They look at history in the hundreds of years. So this is a 20 to 30 year at least horizon, because once these children reach adulthood, they can petition for citizenship for their parents. And then the grandchildren are here.
Jeez.
And as we just heard, what can happen is, these individuals, now they're indoctrinated because they go back to mainland China for most of their, childhood, and they grow up understanding and believing that the way that government and the regime works is the way it works. We're at a point where 23% of babies born in the United States are born to undocumented individuals.
Wait, 23%, almost 1 in 4.
23%. okay, collectively.
Wow.
Now you have a huge number from Russia, from Mexico, from countries like that. The case that's teed up before the United States Supreme Court to be argued this spring and decided in June and July does not hit this issue head on. What you're dealing with there are babies born to parents who have been in the United States for some period of time, not babies born as a result of this commercial exploitation. I think if we had that case, it's an easier case for the United States Supreme Court to overrule the precedent that has stood since 1898. Now, in that case, they held that the subject to part of the 14th Amendment is broad enough so that it would include, in that case, you had a Chinese couple who had established a business and a permanent domicile in San Francisco, had a child. Supreme Court ruled that that individual was subject to the jurisdiction. Arguably, too, in these two cases coming up before the United States Supreme Court this spring, the parents are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. If it's part of a commercial enterprise where there's no intention to remain in the United States, that's a different issue.
Yeah.
And that's the case, I think, that overturns the Supreme Court precedent. The bill, I know Congressman Babin, it's a good effort he's making, but the bill will be unconstitutional as the law currently stands. We got to wait for one for these individual cases. There are major, operations where, at least one in Irvine, what are called maternity hotels.
Yes.
And the individual Chinese will pay $40,000 a piece. You had a $30 million wire coming across, which is why you can prosecute it.
What if the censored medicine that saved millions during the pandemic was being made mostly in China today? It's true. About 80% of the world's ivermectin comes from Asia, but not at the wellness company. No, in fact, we want to introduce American-made ivermectin, safe, trusted, tested, and produced locally in Florida. Ivermectin has been prescribed globally for more than 30 years, even earned the Nobel Prize in Medicine for its proven ability to eliminate parasites. But after success treating COVID, emerging research showed that the wonder drug can actually help with everything from rosacea, arthritis, and even cancer. Yeah, the studies on cancer are amazing. Most pharmacies charge $5 a tablet for 12 milligrams or less, but the wellness company is offering a higher 18 milligram dose for just $3.50 per tablet. You'll get a 6-month supply of 84 tablets, all at an unbeatable price. So support American medicine and Patriot doctors, not China's supply chain. Get your U.S.-made ivermectin today. Go to twc.health/redacted. Use the code redacted to save $30 off plus free shipping.
This birth tourism itself, it's not a federal crime. What is a federal crime, though, is money laundering to support visa fraud. Okay, so now your assistant U.S. attorneys are getting a better handle on how to prosecute these cases because the mothers coming across, and often the fathers, are lying on their visa applications. They'll say they're coming as students, business persons. They'll overstay, okay, and they're not putting the purpose down. That is a federal crime.
So that's how you get. It's like a Capone strategy.
That's how
here.
you nail it.
So it's like,
that's how you nail it.
We can't get them for the murders.
Medicaid center. The other thing is Medicaid, Medicare. You'll have Medicaid set up. Who's going to aid in these births?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as the pregnant lady.
Fraud, right? You got fraud right there, claiming your Medicaid expenses for, especially, you say you're going to have some wealthy individuals coming over. You're going to have some who are going to try to take advantage of United States, federal programs in connection with the births. Okay, and then you're obviously going to have tax evasion by those who are running the maternity hospitals. But it's longer term. It's more than just corrupting our electorate and polluting that. It's potentially, corrupting the business infrastructure of the United States, as well as positions that require top security clearance.
Right.
You see this as a strategic pressure point here. This is, as you pointed out, this isn't about money. It's not about taxes. Who cares about that?
No.
It's a long game strategic pressure point on the United States. What you mentioned a few of them, but what do you ultimately think the Chinese goal is?
Right. To what end? How would they affect the elections? What is their will?
Well, the goal is to subvert the American culture that we've grown accustomed to and we love, right? Because you're displacing a segment of the population with young adults who've been indoctrinated in the Chinese system.
Right.
That's exactly what you're doing, trying to kill it from within. That's exactly what they're doing.
I was trying to be a glass half full, thinking maybe there's some other reason for this, but no, it's as dark and dastardly as you pointed out to be. So ultimately, you think this is going to be really settled in the courts? Massey and Babin and their bill, unconstitutional. It's going to really kind of have to come down to specific cases. Will that be then enough precedent in the Supreme Court to change everything, do you believe?
Well, the problem is you got to tee up the right case. Okay, you got to tee up.
What would the right case look like to you? Like if you were going to put this together, what would the right case look like to you?
The right case is a criminal case. One of these operations against a maternity hospital, and tee it up that way. You know, unfortunately, we've had so much that's already happened, and a fair amount of time is going to pass. You know, the best way to go about this is to publicize the problem and seek constitutional amendment. That's the best way to go about it.
Wow.
That's a big ask.
That's a tall order. Yeah.
It's tough to amend the Constitution, but that's the clearest way to do it.
Do you see any sort of working in tandem with people from a foreign country buying up U.S. land and territory? Of course, this is another piece of this whole strategy, which is buying up so much farmland, you know, near military bases and otherwise across the United States. Can you do this in tandem with something like that?
Well, what you're doing is just highlighting other problems that are going to occur, because you're going to have United States citizens, technically, when they come back, and their children being able to take advantage of federal student loan programs, you know, any type of small business administration thing. All of our federal programs, you know, as U.S. citizens, are going to be able to take advantage of. U.S. passports, list goes on and on and on and on, you know, buying up land, you name it. And the allegiance will be elsewhere. And that's where I think we can get ahead of the curve, you know, by a solid Supreme Court precedent, federal judges who toe the line and try to crack down. The current administration is making it a priority, devoting resources. That gives me some encouragement. But, you know, we generally have a perception that people have good intentions. Not everybody's like that.
Yeah.
And we better get sharp on the long term.
Although, as someone who was an expat for 5 years, FATCA enforcement can be like a Gestapo. If you don't file your taxes while you're living abroad as a U.S. citizen, they can sanction the bank. They can sanction your money. It is really strict. So there might be an advantage to the U.S. government to have this look-see into Chinese banks. I can see how there would be a way that the U.S. government might want to exploit this right back. I mean, I'm thinking like a bad guy, right?
Yeah, but I mean, we have these great relationships and you know, reciprocal treaties with Europe, but I don't know about China. Like how much look-see we get into Chinese banks.
Well, you know, you make a great point, and maybe there's be a slight upside. The odds of the Chinese banks that are telling us the truth and giving us accurate records are between 0 and none.
Right.
You know, and I think the dangers far outweigh any potential benefits. You got to think the Chinese have figured out a way to close that gap.
Yeah. You've got to. But yeah, as it exists right now, I mean, again, I know that foreign expats are terrified of FATCA. You just don't mess with it.
No, that's and should be, and they are, and they're expats. I doubt the individuals who have already committed tax fraud or committed visa fraud, you know, spent $40,000, and have already engaged in this illegal conduct, are going to be terribly worried, you know, about a correct tax return, because they're never going to be extradited.
Right. No, great point.
Good point.
Michael Wynn, wow, great to have you on the show for the first time. I hope you'll come back. Thank you so much for your expertise. We really appreciate it.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Take care.
Thanks, Michael.